Thank you for joining us today. I am Nichol Harshman, Pennsylvania House candidate for a district that is yet to be determined by redistricting. Today, we are going to talk about ending and preventing sex trafficking. More specifically, where is Penn Dot going wrong on sex trafficking? Let's take a look at Penn Dot training for sex trafficking.
Penn Dot is committed to help end human trafficking. In this training, you will learn what human trafficking is and how you can help end modern-day slavery on Pennsylvania's transportation network. Human trafficking. It is the exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of commercial sex, forced labor, or domestic servitude. Human trafficking happens everywhere and can happen to anyone. It is modern-day slavery. Sex trafficking is when victims are forced to engage in sex acts for money.
We're going to pause here for a second. Sex trafficking is a form of rape, and this is the image Penn Dot chooses to represent this specific form of rape in their presentation.
1. There are 21 million victims of human trafficking globally, generating approximately $150 billion annually for traffickers. 2. Human trafficking happens in all 50 states, including D.C. 3. Thousands of children are at risk of being prostituted in the U.S. each year. 4. The average victim may be forced to have sex up to 20 times a day. 3. Thousands of children are at risk of being prostituted in the U.S. each year.
There is a lot going on here. For today, we are going to concentrate on number 3. Number 3 states, thousands of children are at risk of being prostituted in the U.S. each year. Prostitution is a career open to adults only. Prostitution requires consent. Prostitution is not sex trafficking. To identify children as being prostituted is victim blaming. It is harmful to child sex trafficking survivors, and it is used as a way to manipulate the propaganda to get the most funding into the anti-trafficking movement. There are no actual resources for sex trafficking survivors. Sex trafficking is a form of rape, and to identify children as being prostituted shows that Penn Dot has not received the right information on what sex trafficking is, because what it should say is thousands of children are at risk of being raped.
This video highlights how a truck driver helped rescue a victim of human trafficking. As you watch, think about what you would do in that situation. Click to watch.
This is the most accurate part of this entire training presentation put on by Penn Dot. I believe that the majority of child sex trafficking survivors are still being overlooked. They like to glamorize the idea of their savior fantasies, where these young women are becoming adults and they need saved from their moral decisions. If they're making bad moral decisions, they need to be saved. The reality of it is children who are predominantly ages 15 to 18 are not receiving any survivor support. They're not receiving any benefits. Our society gatekeeps these children from receiving survival resources. For example, when I was a houseless youth, I walked into a food bank to get food, and they asked me for my ID, and I had my driver's license, so I gave them my ID, and they offered to call the police for me. I went there for food, and they offered me police support, which would have put me most likely in a juvenile detention or a group home, which is not what I needed. What I needed was quality resources on how to be an adult, and none of that was available. Many sex trafficking survivors who are also being abused inside mental health facilities across the United States. This isn't even being discussed yet. And why is that happening? And this idea of a young woman who they consider children up to the age of, it used to be 24, now it's 21. So 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds have no agency as adults. They're being labeled as children for the anti-trafficking movement statistics, for arrest records, for all of this. And they're not providing any adequate support. And they're not even getting resources or support to actual sex trafficking survivors. They are predominantly targeting 18 and up year old people who are choosing to be in the sex industry instead of going after people who are raping children. Let's take a look at some of the 2020 stats. On February 5th, 2020, the Buyer Beware Act was signed into Pennsylvania law. The Buyer Beware Act was pushed to protect mainly children, and adults, I assume, but mainly children from sex trafficking. So let's protect the children from sex trafficking. Let's find a way to prevent sex trafficking. Let's get more resources to prevent sex trafficking. Unfortunately, the Buyer Beware Act was pushed by many House members based on statistics that were found to be false.
Hi, Mom and Dad. Thanks for coming up. I'd also like to thank Senator Kristen Hill for her sponsorship in the Senate, Dr. Shay Rhodes from the Villanova Law Institute to address commercial sexual exploitation, York County District Attorney Dave Sunday and the District Attorneys Association, the Pennsylvania Interfaith Justice Coalition, the Pennsylvania Family Institute, the Commonwealth's Victim Advocate Jennifer Storm, and my colleagues in the House for joining us today. Human trafficking is one of man's oldest and most vile trades. There are cases of drug trafficking throughout the Commonwealth, from Erie to Philly, the Poconos to Greene County. In fact, the Polaris Project reported 152 cases of human trafficking in Pennsylvania. The true number of human trafficking cases is likely much higher, since this crime is vastly underreported and hidden among other crimes such as prostitution, theft, and drug dealing. Human trafficking is a hidden epidemic. Most victims of trafficking are between the ages of 12 and 14. Let me read that again. Most victims are between the ages of 12 and 14.
January of 2020, House members were testifying, saying that the age of entrance into sex trafficking was 13. Now, first of all, that's not true. Polaris Project, which runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, is the one that put out that statistic. And when challenged, they backstepped and said, oh, well, that's actually not true. We were wrong. Oopsie. The age of entrance into sex trafficking is 19. So let's talk about this age of entrance. There was no age of entrance into sex trafficking whenever I was 9 years old. I was a 9-year-old being raped. Stating things like an age of entrance into an abuse is not only victim blaming, it is very, very problematic overall. And it takes away the agency of survivors themselves. Now, the Buyer Beware Act was pushed and it was signed into law to end sex trafficking, prevent sex trafficking, get more resources to protect the children. Let's look at the actual arrest statistics for Pennsylvania for 2020. This was signed into law February 5th. And in the entire year of 2020, Pennsylvania only managed to go after 7 sex traffickers, They only successfully prosecuted 5 of the 7 sex traffickers, and they didn't prosecute a single sex trafficker of children. They did not prosecute one single child rapist, even though they pushed this law as the way to end child sex trafficking. Because the reality of it is they are mismanaging anti-trafficking resources and funding to morally censor people, if you will. None of this is about ending actual sex trafficking or protecting 9-year-olds from being raped. So the Buyer Beware Act was signed into law, and it's an entire mess. It's useless. Let's continue with Penn Dot's training on sex trafficking.
You know, traffickers have done an amazing job convincing us that she's just a prostitute and that we should just turn and look the other way. And this is a really highly effective business model for them, isn't it? Because we're all looking away, and they and the buyers are effectively raping America's women and children. They and the buyers are effectively raping America's women and children and making a ton of money.
Truckers Against Trafficking is like the glue that's going to bond the industry. You guys are the ones that are putting out the materials. You're putting out all the information. Everybody's got smartphones now. Everybody's on Facebook. I mean, just a sheer barrage of the information has done nothing but good.
They even admit that this is an industry. To share information with each other, to target prostitutes, while both adult and child sex trafficking survivors are targeted, arrested, and charged, and suffocated without access to resources. Nothing about this is a form of help. Help starts with, how can I help you? Not, how can I dictate you need saved based on my moral opinion of you.
Penn Dot's driver license centers distribute the Truckers Against Trafficking wallet cards to the general public, as well as all individuals that complete a CDL renewal or an initial CDL transaction. The national hotline number is on the front, where anyone in the U.S. suspecting human trafficking can call to anonymously and confidentially report a tip. The card emphasizes that under no circumstances should you approach a trafficker. Instead, make the call from a safe place, such as a personal vehicle. The card is the basic definition of human trafficking, questions to ask potential victims of trafficking, as well as what law enforcement needs to follow up on a situation. On the right-hand side of the card is a list of red flags to look for if you think someone is a potential victim of human trafficking.
Let's look at what they are suggesting you do if you believe somebody is a sex trafficking survivor currently in their abuse. They are suggesting that you walk up to them and say, do you keep your money? Do you have your own money? Are you in charge of your own money? Really? I mean, think about that for a second. If you see somebody, like, let's just say, walking out of Walmart, and perhaps they look like they're having a bad day, or they're stressed out, or maybe they're just autistic and they like to not make eye contact. Imagine going up to them and saying, I'm sorry, I'm here to save you. Do you have your own money? If you don't have your own money, you might be being abused and you just don't know it. Let me save you. Instead, just ask people if they need support. Help starts with, how can I help you?
If you suspect a trafficking situation is taking place, call the hotline immediately. Always remember that it's okay to be wrong. Better to call and not have it turn out to be a trafficking situation than to leave it alone and that victim continues to endure a life of slavery.
No, it is absolutely not okay to be wrong in this situation. According to the National Survivor Network, 90.8% of survivors are arrested and experience our punishment system during the course of saving them. 90.8% of survivors are arrested. Now, here in Pennsylvania, the arrest for prostitution is not expungible. you're going to end up destroying somebody's entire future because they won't be able to get a job. They won't be able to get housing. In some states, they can't even get HUD housing if they were arrested for prostitution. So what you're doing is not, see something, say something. It's okay to be wrong. It's not okay to be wrong because you are destroying people's lives based on a suspicion. If you see somebody that you think is being abused, ask them if there's a way that you can support them. Ask them if they need help.
Penn Dot is doing its part by educating those who are the eyes and ears of Pennsylvania's transportation network. Driver License Center employees, Welcome Center employees, CDL drivers, and transit agency employees. We are working together with Truckers Against Trafficking, law enforcement, nonprofits, other government agencies, and partners in the transportation industry to end modern-day slavery. Remember, you can make a difference. Please contact the Secretary of Transportation's office, Truckers Against Trafficking, or the Blue Campaign with any questions you may have. Thank you for completing this course. Please be sure to select the Log Off button at the bottom of the screen to receive credit.
Thank you for completing this course for credit. Ha ha ha. So now we see the real motivation behind this Penn Dot training. It's time to get serious about ending and preventing sex trafficking in Pennsylvania. When I'm elected into the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, we are going to get to the bottom of the mismanagement of anti-trafficking funding and resources. Thanks for coming today. I hope you learned something. Please join us next time.